This week on Act Out, there's only so much you can take from someone, and with the recent plans to starve some 700,000 Americans, we may have reached that threshold. We dive to the bottom line to uncover the real impetus behind such legislation and the horrifying ways in which we spend money that could, and should, go to we the people. Next up, we don't shut up, we shut down. A message, parallels, and lessons from a recent climate court case in Germany. From tweets to marching in the streets, this is Act Out.
Rockets! Blockade! Bulldozers swarm outside the checkpoint gate. A noise flash broke the hush and blew me into the street. I awoke next to the body of my baby. No!
Welcome to Act Out. I'm Eleanor Goldfield, and this is your tipping point. So last week, the Trump administration finalized plans to try and starve another 700,000 people via work requirement regulations. Agricultural Secretary Sonny Perdue said that the new requirement would move people towards more, quote, self-sufficiency and into employment. Interesting thing for the son of a farmer to say, who was born in the age of farm subsidies, laid out on the heels of the New Deal. And despite almost waxing poetic, or as best as these shit-for-brains can actually wax poetic, about his father's hard work on the farm, his advice to today's struggling farmers was simply, get another job. Because I'm sure had that been the government's response to him and his family in the 1940s, he would have been all the way behind it, 100%. I mean, of course, you totally have time for another job when you wake up at 5 a.m. to desperately try and scrape a living while your president is single-handedly and oftentimes in less than 260 characters at a time hacking away at your livelihood by, for instance, starting trade wars with China, ignoring climate change, pedestaling monoculture subsidies that benefit big farmers over independent ones, and cutting regulations that would not only protect smaller farmers, but would ensure healthy soil, water, and, food. And so here's another interesting point. According to the USDA, the new rule will cut food stamp spending by $5.5 billion over 5 years. Okay, so you want to save money. There are, in fact, easier ways to do so rather than starving people. For instance, the Trump administration has responded to its trade mess with China by essentially parachuting cash into farm country, handing out $12 billion to farmers hurt by the trade war in 2018 and another $16 billion this year. And yet the farm economy is still going down the shitter anyway. Farm bankruptcies spiked 24% in September compared to the same month a year before. With debt loads rising and commodity prices stuck in the mud, conventional agriculture banks are placing stricter terms on farm loans and doling out less money. So it turns out that starting a fire and throwing money on it doesn't work. It's almost like the guy born with a golden spoon in his mouth. Seriously, though. He actually would have been richer today had he just sat on daddy's money rather than using it to be the shittiest, most arrogant, dick-brained businessman I've seen since a guy tried to sell me a used condom in a Los Angeles alleyway. Anyway, it's almost like this guy doesn't actually know how to handle an economy or what the fuck self-sufficiency is at all. Not to mention that Secretary of Ag, who infamously held a prayer for rain on the steps of the Georgia state capitol in 2017. There you have it, folks. If you want something, you either got to be born with it or you just pray for it. That is the American way. Unfortunately, for almost 750,000 people, that shit doesn't work. Because when you steal wages, the capitalist value placed on our tireless work, and mold it into fighter jets and golden parachutes for the corrupt, when you steal the basic human rights of food, water, healthcare, shelter, even the air that we breathe, when you steal these basic human rights and then tell the people that they're not working hard enough as you hoard the gains of that hard work, there's not much more to steal. This well is dust. This body is bled dry. An entire empire is built on the backs of the very people now facing starvation. And that's what makes this whole thing so ironic, that the more arrogant and self-assured this empire becomes, the more it damages its own foundation. For the paltry sum of $5.5 billion over 5 years, they're willing to starve 700,000 people. They're willing to risk that wrath quite simply because they think it won't actually come. And that's on us as well. But just so we're clear, this isn't about inspiring people to work. People who already work their asses off to survive, and people who are too old, people who are disabled, people who can't find work in a gig economy, an ageist, sexist, racist system. It's not about their fucking bootstraps. Because let me tell you, those bootstraps were auctioned off long ago to pay for military shoelaces. And this isn't even about the $5.5 billion, because you could find that in loose change all over the country. Not only in the Department of Agriculture, as they try to stem the flow of shit cascading from Trump's economic disasters, but I don't know, how about in that aforementioned military, the largest military the world has ever seen? Based on 2019 numbers, the official military budget, mind you, that's not the shadow budget where some $21 trillion is still missing. This is just the above board budget that we're talking about here. That's $716 billion. So that's almost $2 billion a day, more than $13 billion a week. So if starving 700,000 people makes you $5.5 billion over the course of 5 years, you could literally make that back in less than 3 days from the military budget alone. Hold on to that for a sec. Less than 3 days. That's what it would take to stop killing people and start feeding people. It's pretty remarkable, isn't it? Or how about subsidies for environmental destruction? Conservative estimates put U.S. direct subsidies to the fossil fuel industry at roughly $20 billion per year. Right, so here, rather than starving people for a paltry $1 billion in sum a year, you could just stop paying people to destroy our very ability to live on this fucking planet, and you'd still have $19 billion left over to, I don't know, do some cleanup, or hell, buy everyone in the world a round of drinks, or end world hunger. Really, almost anything else. Yet another place to look for cash other than couch cushions and poor people's stomachs. How about corporate tax loopholes and breaks? According to a Good Jobs First report from last year, from 2000 to 2017, the federal government alone awarded big business $72.3 billion in grants and allocated tax credits. Also, thanks to a Good Jobs First tracker on Amazon alone, just Amazon, just the one company, since 2000, Amazon has been awarded at least $2.7 billion in subsidies. But that makes sense, because without Amazon, you'd have a lot fewer people needing food stamps. And of course, there's really no way that Amazon could survive as a company on a measly $11.2 billion a year in profits if they actually paid taxes on that. If they didn't also, on top of that, get millions in subsidies, and on top of that, paid starvation wages. I mean, they just wouldn't be able to make it. And we got to look out for them. We got to look out for the corporations, the defenseless, the voiceless, the inanimate stack of papers that at its core makes up a corporation. That is what makes America great. Oh, that and Trump's golf trips, which to date have cost $115 million in travel and security alone. Because I know when you're filling out your tax forms, you like knowing that your hard-earned dollars are going to a pompous, fascist windbags golf swing rather than feeding the hungry. $115 million. Just as a comparison, the average SNAP recipient receives $127 a month for food. $127. In the end, the bottom line is this. It is always this. The bottom line. It's about funneling money from the bottom to the top. The simple job of living off our labor. Moving money with the swipe of a wrist that ends in bloodshed, bombs, hunger, thirst. Leisure for the top 1% based on the work and suffering of the 99. That's what these numbers ultimately mean. They're the monetary manifestation of a capitalist oppression. They are the easily quantifiable means to represent injustice. An injustice that we should always remember has lives behind the bottom lines. It has human stories behind the stats. The numbers are good attention grabbers, and yeah, I encourage you to use them as I have. But let's keep in mind that connecting humans to these numbers is vital for personifying our demands, for breathing actual life into our movements. It's how we can wrap our heads around these numbers and be moved to act, rather than just crumple into the absurdity of this shit show. It's where we can find places to connect across theoretical lines and dividers. For instance, in the ongoing strikes in France, which are ongoing as we film this, unions across the country have brought the nation to a near standstill as hundreds of thousands have filled the streets to demand an end to Macron's neoliberal policies that threaten livelihoods and pensions. The realities of this crisis have been borne by the people of France in their homes and in their workplaces for a very long time, and now they're spilling into the streets. Anarchists, Yellow Vests, Extinction Rebellion, people from all across the political spectrum are finding these points of solidarity, intersections where they can stand together and take hold of the power that we all have as workers. That is power. That is the personification of pension statistics. That is the kind of work that forces governments to their knees. As Emma Goldman once said, and was then arrested for saying it, ask for work. If they don't give you work, ask for bread. If they do not give you work or bread, then take bread. And they are taking our bread. And it's about damn time that we take it back. On the subject of taking a stand, last week we sat down with folks from the German group We Don't Shut Up, We Shut Down to talk about a recent court case that parallels many of the same issues that we're seeing here in the United States, from the defense of corporate profit to the attack on free speech and assembly. Take a look.
We were blocking a coal power plant, one of the most dirtiest coal power plants in Germany, from a company called RWE, which is one of the biggest emitters of CO2 in Europe. Or no, let's say it's the biggest emitter of CO2 in Europe. And one of the dirtiest power plants was blocked by us at this day. By blocking the conveyor belts and also the diggers. We used climbing equipment and lock-ons, and we put a tripod on the conveyor belt, which forced them to almost shut it down completely. On this day, it was just running on around 8% of its normal capacity. We calculated how much CO2 emission we prevented from being put in the atmosphere, and it was like 26,000 tons of CO2. We were around 15 people, and we were also there was also one journalist who was not taking part in the action, but trying to make pictures and videos from the action. And yeah, of course, it needs a lot of preparation, this kind of action. So a lot of more people were involved who were not so visible because they were in the background.
And were all 15 of you charged equally, or were there different charges?
No, not everybody is charged because we decided to refuse to give our identity. So in the end, the police was not able to get the identity from everybody, but from 5 people, they were able to identify us. Yeah, and now the 5 people are, we are confronted with this court case now. It just took everybody to the prison for some hours, and yeah, for us, for several of us, they confronted us with a kind of imprisonment where you can be in prison for several weeks. I don't know. It's called Untersuchungshaft in German. I can't tell you how it is in English. But yeah, at this point, we decided, or at least 3 of us decided to give their identity because we didn't want to go to prison for several months, which already happened to activists, for example, from the Hambacher forest there were two persons who ended up for 8 months in this kind of imprisonment for protesting against the coal or to saving the forest. So that what we didn't want that, obviously, and then we decided to give our ID. And others were identified by tattoos. One person was identified by the tattoo from the police, and another one was identified because he had to go to the hospital. And in the hospital, the police was contacting the hospital, and they gave the data from this person to the police, which is totally illegal in Germany, but they did it.
Is it legal to just put someone in prison for 8 months because they haven't given their identity?
Okay, so you have this imprisonment on remand, but actually this is made for very strong crimes. So actually for this kind of protest, it's not really made for it, but they're just using it because they can. And then they were using it. But now what they did, they changed in some states, they changed the police law. And also in the state where the protests against the coal is very strong, in the Rhineland, where the open pit coal mines are, and also the occupied forest, and they made a new law. They changed the police law, so they can keep you if you prevent. No, if you say you don't want to give your ID, they can keep you for 5 days in prison.
So how long were you in jail for that action?
We just were there for 1 day and 1 night, and after the night, they told us that we will go to this imprisonment on remand, and then we said we will give our ID.
So then what happened? How did the court case then move forward?
So the court case started two years later, because it always takes a long time with this court cases in Germany. And for us, it was clear that we want to have it politically, like to use the attention we had at this moment, especially with this 2 million compensation thing from RWE, the company. We said, wow, this is really something very big, and we want to make it public because we want to talk about climate justice, about the movement for climate justice in the German media, or also in the international media. And yeah, but in Germany, separate, there are two different kind of laws, like the civil or private law and the law from the state. And now what finished is the court case for trespassing, for disturbance of public supply, and for resistance against police. This was what we were accused for from the state, from the side of the state. And now what is not finished, didn't even started, is the civil right, because what was very new at this moment was that every RWE said, the company said, we want 2 million euros compensation from the people who blocked this power plant, what they never did before. Yeah.
And the 2 million euros, is that basically what they say that they lost because you blocked their production that day?
Yeah, they say this is the economic damage they had to cover. Of course, we say it's not a damage because we prevented this big amount of CO2. We started talking about climate justice, possibility to talk about climate justice once again, and we say obviously that what they are doing by keeping this power plants going is the crime, and not what we are doing. What I said before is that we wanted to have a political court case. So we said what we did was a case of justifiable. I don't know. You have this in the States. Justifiable state of emergency. That's how it's called. So we said it was a case of justifiable state of emergency, and for that reason, we also have had the possibility to take witnesses and experts into the court case. So it's called justifiable state of emergency. It means that if you do a crime or something called a crime, which is to prevent something worse. For example, in our case, we are saying we are trying to prevent the climate crisis. I mean, at least for a little bit. Then it's not illegal to do so. That's what this paragraph is saying.
So then you, in this previous case, you won that argument.
Okay, that's a good question. Actually, we didn't, because the court wasn't accepting it, and to be honest, it's more for making the court case political. It's not that we were expecting that the court case that the judge will accept it, because this never, or I just know one case where this happened before in Germany. So normally they are saying you cannot argue in this way, and in the end it was said that we are not guilty, because it was really hard for them to say trespassing was working, because the whole power plant has to be there has to be a fence around the whole power plant, so there cannot be any holes in the fence. And for these reasons, and also for the disturbance, it was that we didn't change the infrastructure or didn't destroy the infrastructure, but just put something on top of it, like the tripod, and we didn't really connect ourselves to the infrastructure, to the conveyor belt itself. That's why the court decided that this was not disturbance. So in our case, it's just 250 to 300 euro per person. So it's not a lot of money for that. Also, this was a quite successful court case for us, I think. We are going to fight it because we think it's not right. Also, if you look at the German law situation, because resistance means that you have to activity, as when you have to do an active, in an active way, you have to resist the police, actually. And in this kind of actions with lock-ons and tripods, it's not a very active way. For example, we are not trying in this situation, nobody is trying to hit the police. So for this reason, it's not really resistance from our perspective. So we are trying to do something against it. But we also believe that the prosecutor will restart the whole court case again, because she said we need to go for 1 year to prison, and now we have to pay 250 to 300 euros, which is not a lot. And I guess from this side also we are expecting a next step. What we expect is that this is not the end of the court case, but it will be restarted again probably next year, because she's doing this appeal for sure. Because the difference between what she was claiming, like 1 year in prison, and what now came out, in her perspective, this is obviously not enough. So, we expecting it to go on. And also, we still have the private court case anyway.
So talk about that. Talk about the private, or the I guess what we would call in the United States a civil court case for the 2 million euros. What does that look like? Where is that case standing right now?
So this is something very new for us, for the whole climate movement, and we expect, we think it's a kind of way to intimidate us and also the movement, because it's growing so strong at the moment that from the side of the repression, they have to do something against it. And RWE for the first time is asking for compensation for the damage, the economic damage, which was done to them by an action. Obviously we are saying that we prevented this damage, the climate change, climate crisis and everything. But from their perspective, they are trying to do this. And it never happened before so far. And also the amount of this, it's very huge, because they are asking us for 2 million of euro. But also what they created by this was a lot of attention. After we heard that this is the case, we started to do a lot of press work, and obviously the interest of the media was quite big because of this huge amount they are asking us. And it will start when the criminal court case is over, when it's ended, then they can start the civil court case. The movement is coming together more in the last month, and there are a lot of small affinity group actions happening. There was this big march of Fridays for Future where 1.4 million people participated in whole Germany. It was one of the biggest marches for a lot of years. So there are a lot of things are happening, and the response of the government is it's a joke. From their plans, they want to burn it until the year of 2038, which is like 19 more years, which is really unbelievable. Also, if you look at the movement, they are not really responding on what is happening in the from side of the people, and and now there you have again the COP, but also we don't expect a lot to come out from the COP in Madrid. And also I don't know, Germany somehow seems to be able to or the image of Germany is in the international discussion is somehow that this is a very green country, but this is really not true. I mean, there is so much lignite burned here. Like the biggest production of lignite is in Germany. There's no other country which is burning this amount of lignite, which is the worst energy you can produce and the dirtiest.
For more on We Shut Down's work, check out wedon'tshutup.org/en. And that will do it for this week's Dose of Dissent. Remember, the best way to stay up to date on our work is to sign up for the newsletter at the address below. Help us combat censorship. To those who have donated, thank you so much. Please keep spreading the word in order to ensure our ability to keep acting out. From the Devil's Den, good night and act out. And real quick, to keep independent, non-corporatized media like this show going, visit patreon.com/actout.
I can hear the boots are stomping. Come on, boys, let's get some rocks to throw. I can't stand to hear my father cry anymore. Time we left one of you motherfuckers dead in the road. We've been backing up inch by inch. We got nowhere else to go. It's been too many years since you pushed and said my shove. I'm not a